Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome back to The Doctor Will See You Now. I hope you've been having wonderful reads since we were last together. I hope you've been finding books that have transported you, comforted you, scared you, made you question things. Because I think any text that has the ability to move us in any way is so important. And then there's that notion where there's books that have been around for a while, but you haven't come across them for one reason or another. And then you come across them, and oh boy, what an impact they have on you. I've been having to travel quite a bit recently up and down the M6 and into Wales and back again up to Edinburgh. And I have to say, the author that I have with me today, her books, they were sent to me quite recently, and they have kept me such wonderful company as I've been on these journeys. The audiobooks, please, I haven't been reading the books as I've been driving. The audiobooks have just been fabulous, fabulous company. So everybody, if you'd welcome with me Rachel Mclean into the consulting room. Rachel, wonderful to actually meet you face to face after your work has kept me, as I say, has kept me company and has kept me encouraged on my mammoth driving. How are you, Rachel?
I'm very well, thank you. All the happier to hear how much you've enjoyed the books and the
Re-
narration.
really have, really have. And just for anybody who's not familiar with you and your writing, well, Rachel's an award-winning crime author, best known for her Dorset Crime series, and that's the series we're going to talk about in our session today. Book one, The Corfe Castle Murders, won the Kindle Storyteller Award in 2021, and she sold millions of copies of her books in digital format. Between April 2024, that's this year if you're watching now, and February 25, Hera, the publishers, is delighted to be publishing the full series in print paperback for the first time. I think that's wonderful. You know, again, reading however we read, it's so important. And whether we're digital, print, as I say, audiobooks, you know, they're meaning so much to me at the minute. So I'm really pleased and thrilled, you know, that your books are reaching us now. Um, I've got the third one in the series
Oh,
to hand.
I've got the first one with me.
Yeah, excellent. And again, if you haven't, if you're not familiar with Rachel's work, can I just highly recommend them to you? So I've been on your website, and I think with the add-ons and the prequels, and we're going to talk about the way you grow your series. I think there's about 12 books, and then there's the Detective Zoe Finch series, the
Yep.
Cumbria Crime series that you've written with Joel Hames, the
Mhm.
Tanner and McBride series, and then so much more that seems to be in the pipeline, which is so
Mm.
exciting. But if you don't mind for our session today, because we're going to be about half an hour, 45 minutes, and if we concentrate on those first three books and your style of writing, your process and how you came to things, is that all right with you?
That's absolutely fine.
And hopefully we can have part two, part three, part four at
Yeah,
various other
that'd be
points.
great. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind setting us off by talking about your journey into being published as a crime fiction author.
Mm.
Um, how you came. I've read, you know, like you've been writing in different forms, you know, for a while.
Mm.
But I wonder this notion of um being published as a crime fiction author. How did
Mm.
that come
Mm.
about?
Yeah, well, I've been writing all my life, like many writers. I wrote my first novel, in inverted commas, serialized story when I was about 9 or 10, I think. And so I've always enjoyed writing stories. And then I sort of stopped doing it for a while. You
Mhm.
you grow up and you have to write serious things. And even at secondary school, you spend more time analysing other people's fiction than writing
Yeah.
your own. But I was always the person who would do the writing. Any job I had, I would be the person who people would come to write press releases or speeches or summaries or training material or anything, because I loved writing and I loved turning um, things that were pretty turgid and difficult to understand into something that you could understand and get to grips
Yeah.
with. So I did a lot of work. I worked for a bank, and I did a lot of work turning their processes into user-friendly manuals and
Thank you.
guides. And then I was on a course. I was working for the Environment Agency at the time, and this was in around, it was early 2000s. And I was on a business writing course, and I was actually checking out this course for other people to do because I was in charge of commissioning that kind of training. And as part of the course, you had to do some business writing. You had to plan a long piece of writing. And I was thinking, I don't actually have anything coming up that I need to plan. I know what, I'll plan a novel. I'll spend the day planning a novel because I've had some ideas. So I planned that novel. I still know the guy who runs the course, and he thinks it's great that I planned my first novel on his course. I planned the novel. That became A House Divided, which was the first book in my political thriller Division Bell trilogy. And then, I mean, it took me 15 years to write that book, because in the meantime I had 2 children and a life and busy, lots of things to do. I thought I'd write lots on maternity leave, and then I realised maternity leave is there for a very good reason, and it's not for sitting around writing. So eventually I spent a bit of time querying agents, but I met Heidi Goody and Ian Grant, who now write with me as Millie Ravensworth. And they were indie, they were self-published, and they were really enjoying it, and they were reaching readers, and they were selling books. And I thought, I quite fancy that, because I like the idea of having control over
Yeah.
my own writing
Yeah.
career, being able to write what I want with a firm sort of grasp of what readers want as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I also like the fact that it brings me directly into contact with my readers. So I have a direct relationship with my readers because I'm selling them books. And that's one of the things I love. So I self-published, I think 9 books of various genres. I genre hopped and tried all sorts of things, and none of them, they found a bit of an audience, but none of them were doing particularly well. I wanted to be a full-time writer. I wanted to sell enough books to ditch my day job. By that point, I was a freelance technical writer, which was great because I was writing, but I was writing about web design, which was much less fun than writing fiction. And then in early 2020, this was before the world went pear-shaped because of COVID, I was thinking, I just got a pop-up, let me get rid of that. I was thinking that I wanted to really make a go of the crime writing. And that I wanted, of the writing. And that I wanted to find a genre where I could find a big enough audience to be able to make a living. And I loved writing suspense. I always enjoyed writing suspense. I knew that was a skill set of mine and something that I could really get into. And I like the idea of writing series and being able to develop characters that I spend a long time with and develop them over a course of books. And crime lends itself perfectly to that, because you can write a good long crime series, you can keep coming back to the same detectives, you can have them closely involved in what's going on with the mysteries and everything, and you can really develop them. So I started writing the Zoe Finch series, which was set in Birmingham, my home city, and it took off by that Christmas. So it really took a year with the writing, and then I published those, the first one in July. By Christmas, I was selling enough books to be able to give up my day job.
Wow.
Which
That's
was
phenomenal.
fantastic. Yeah. That was all as an indie. So I was doing mainly ebook sales, but also some print on demand paperbacks. And then when that series had reached 6 books early the next year, early 2021, very early 2021 by the time I'd written them. And I was thinking, what do I want to do now? I'd quite like to write another series. And rather than continuing for a long time with Zoe, I loved writing about Zoe, but I knew that by that point I was a better crime writer than I had been when I wrote the first Zoe book. And I thought, if I have a new series, that's a starting point for people, and it will be a better book. Because I've got 6 books under my belt, I've got the experience. So I thought Leslie was Zoe's boss. DCI Leslie Clark. She was Zoe's boss. I really enjoyed writing her. She was a lot of fun to write.
She's phenomenal. She really
Yeah,
is. Yeah,
I'd love to go for a pint with her.
totally.
It'd be a lot of fun. And so I thought, right, I'll give her a spin-off series. Something had happened in Birmingham that meant she needed a bit of a slower pace of life. So I thought, right, I'll move her somewhere rural. And I love Dorset. I've been going to
Ah.
Dorset all my life.
See, I
So
wondered why, this idea of these places that you choose. You mentioned Birmingham because that's where you're from, but you'd
yeah.
spent a lot of time in Dorset. Sorry, I interrupted. Go on, carry
No,
on.
no, no. I realise I've gone past your question and
Please
into
don't.
the
This is
Dorset
great.
crime
This is
series.
lovely. Go on.
Good. So yeah, I know Dorset really well. My parents had a caravan there when I was a child. So all my formative memories are down there, learning to ride a bike on the back streets of Wareham, learning to swim in Swanage Bay, all that kind of thing. And I thought I'd love to write about Dorset. So I took myself down there for a good long research trip where I spent a week tromping around hillsides and walking along cliffs and finding places to dump a body. And started writing the Corfe Castle murders while I was there. And I was a bit worried. I thought, I've done well with these Zoe Finch books. I've got readers. It's a bit of a risk
Yeah.
launching a new series.
Yeah.
And it turned out, I mean, it was the best decision I could have made because people loved Dorset. They loved reading about Dorset. They loved Leslie. And those books have done phenomenally well. And obviously, Corfe Castle Murders winning the Kindle Storyteller Award brought it to even more readers, and was a real boost. So, and I am planning on writing more Dorset crime books as well. So
I,
my heart is in Dorset as well as in Birmingham.
I love the fact that you took that decision to say, okay, with my experience, I want to do something different so that I can show that I've been, developing my
Mm.
skill. Um, and it clearly paid off to do that change. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the Dorset crime series, given given that there are so many strands to your writing around crime fiction, thank you for explaining to us, because my next question was going to be police procedural, why that, and you've told us why that. But was wondering how you must have the most amazing either filing system or brain system. All these series with their own spirit and character, and yet you've got the fact that they feed beautifully into each other, to a greater or a lesser degree.
Mm.
Am I allowed to ask what's your secret?
I think it's that the main characters feel real.
Without a
And
doubt.
so when they feel real to me and they
Mhm.
seem to feel real to readers, I've been in rooms where readers have been arguing about whether or not they like one of my characters, and I'm
Mhm.
just sitting there quietly thinking, you do know I made this person up. But it's really gratifying to know that people have come to life for readers. So for me, they feel real. And I think in lockdown, that was great because it was like I had more people I could spend time with.
Yeah.
I had Zoe and Mo and their team, and they were my imaginary friends that I was hanging out with and sort of virtually driving around Birmingham with while they were chasing criminals. So what I find is when I start writing a character, the style of each series changes, but it sort of comes back to me with the voice of the character in my head.
Yes. Yeah.
So, for example, when Joel and I started writing the Cumbria Crime series, and Joel is my editor on all the other books. He
Uh-huh.
doesn't edit the Cumbria Crime books because obviously he's a co-author, and he's got a filing system in his head too, so he can remember all the practical information and all the biographical stuff about the characters. He's really good at that. But when we started writing the Cumbria Crime series, I remember thinking, oh, it'll be weird going back to writing Zoe after writing Leslie all this time. But as soon as I started writing her again,
Yeah.
it felt like falling back into the skin of somebody who felt very familiar. And it was really nice actually, because while the Zoe books are grittier,
Mhm.
even the Cumbria ones are grittier than the Dorset ones. And we very deliberately chose West Cumbria to make them grittier than having
Right.
them in the not in the Lake District. I was
Yeah.
in the Peak District this weekend. It's on my mind. But I think but Zoe herself is softer than Leslie.
Mhm.
And I think in both cases that gives it a bit of contrast that helps it work. So
Yeah.
Leslie's take no prisoners attitude helps keep the Dorset crime books from becoming twee or too cozy.
Yeah.
And Zoe's softer side and the fact that she is a great boss and is always really good to her team, for example, helps soften the fact that she's dealing with bodies found in industrial estates and dragged out of canals and in the bottom of mines and things like that.
Mhm.
So yeah, and none of that is I thought out consciously. I think subconsciously that just I hit the tone that I like reading,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's how it came out.
Thank you. Thank you. So, as you've explained to us, Leslie, she takes this time. Uh, she's advised to take a post in a quieter spot. And but as it says on the publicity of the Cove Castle murders, she has to hit the ground running. I mean, literally, even before she's taken up the
Yeah.
day before she goes in office, she's on the scene. But there's something else I think that you've done that really works well with that tension between outsider and insider, and that's that ongoing tension between herself and DS Dennis Frampton,
Mm.
and the shall we say the moral battle that rages between them, as well as maybe procedural issues. Where did Dennis come from? I mean, and how have you ensured that whilst he might drive us crazy,
And he drives me crazy too
but
sometimes.
there's still a sense of him being a decent copper
Mm.
as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think I think that was because I was moving to Dorset and because I very deliberately wasn't writing cozy mysteries,
Hmm.
but it's a cozy mystery trope being somewhere beautiful and rural. I sort of was having a little joke around some of the cozy tropes. So the swear jar is
Yeah.
very much me doing that because one of the tropes in cozy mystery is that nobody ever swears. Which we're finding with the London Cozy Mystery series is a real challenge because Zaf is in his 20s and we've got to try and think of things for him to say that aren't swear words. Um, but so I thought, right, how do I sort of, and Leslie is sweary as anything in the Zoe books.
And how?
Yeah, and swears in the Dorset books. And I just came up with this idea of the swear jar. And it's sort of like it acts as a bellwether in Leslie and Dennis's relationship. What's going on with the swear jar? Is it in the filing cabinet? Is it on top of the filing cabinet? Is Leslie swearing? Is she not swearing? How is Dennis reacting to that? And then right at the end of book 9, she actually puts money in the swear jar. I don't think she'll ever do it again, but she does it.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
it's her way of conceding to Dennis that he has a point and showing that she respects him. She may not agree with him, she has a different attitude to life, but they do come to have a mutual respect, which is not there at the beginning,
Definitely
but
no,
that grows.
definitely not. I mean, talk about like rubbing up against one another, and the exasperation I think on both sides. But again, the important thing that it does not stop them, delivering on their duties and on
Mm,
bringing the perpetrators, to justice. So I think that's good. Another aspect that I wanted to bring up, which was so enjoyable, was the way that you bring, romance into Leslie's life. That you write this older female couple. First of all, that you have an older female detective. I think she's 46 when
yeah,
when the
46,
series
47.
starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is excellent, and the whole thing of visibility of women, you know, in moving into a different part of their life. But then the
Mm.
fact that she falls in love with another woman. Were you worried at all that might sort of detract that you might lose readers bringing that in?
I did worry a bit. It mirrored my own experience to a significant degree. So around the time I was writing the Corfe Castle Murders, trying to think when I came out, it was I think it was just before I wrote the Corfe Castle Murders, and it was something I wanted to get in there. I wanted to get a woman who comes out later in life,
Yeah, yeah,
but I didn't want to make a big deal of it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the thing that's interesting about Leslie and Elsa's relationship isn't the fact that they're both women, it's the fact that Elsa's a criminal lawyer and represents organised crime. Um, and and that's in there a lot. So Leslie and Elsa's relationship becomes more and more important to the plots as the series goes on, but it's not because they're women. And I very deliberately didn't want to have that becoming a thing in Leslie's team. So Dennis doesn't make comment. And if anybody was going to be funny about
It
Leslie
would be,
being in a
yeah,
relationship with a woman, it would be
yeah.
Dennis. And I deliberately don't make him like that because, to be honest, my experience has been of acceptance and people being really positive about I'm now married to another woman, Sally, and everybody in our lives has been very positive and accepting. So I wanted to see that for Leslie as well. I
Beautiful.
think that the thing I got wrong, and I realised this when I met Sally, which was after I'd written the first few books and after Leslie and Elsa had settled down, is that actually solving murders when you're falling in love would probably be quite hard because your brain doesn't really work when you're in the early stages of a relationship. So the fact that Leslie still has time to go off solving murders and is not somewhat distracted isn't all that accurate. But yeah, I wanted to bring that in. And it's something I have in all my books. I have queer characters in all my books. So, for example, the McBride and Tanner ones, we've got Petra. She's very different from Leslie. She has a different girlfriend in every book. Not for want of trying to be monogamous and settle down, but
Yeah,
she just is bad at relationships, messes them up, and gets dumped in every book. But she's a sort of a bit like Leslie in some ways, but a more extreme version. So yeah, it's something I wanted to show gay people just doing stuff that isn't about the
yeah.
fact that they're gay. And it's something that I have a lot of friends who write sapphic romance. And obviously sexuality is at the core of those books. And I like the idea of writing mainstream fiction that has queer characters in. And I have readers who are queer and love the fact that I'm writing this, but I also have lots of straight readers who either like it or don't care one way or the other.
Yeah,
Not at all.
wonderful. I mean, I think for me, the importance is these are people doing life,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I would argue a little bit with you about the notion of, falling in love and being distracted. But what we do know is the fact that Leslie is such a consummate professional.
She is.
She really is. And in book two, that there's a little bit of, I won't say conflict of interest, but a little bit suspicion around Elsa and involvement with that law firm because of clients and what happens in that book. So I think you've just written someone who is so devoted, to duty and doing the job, and with some love as well, which I think is great. And I like the dynamic between them because I think Elsa's so sussed and like is just not phased by Leslie's wobbles or doubts or things like that. So thank you so much for that. So
Sure.
let's go into a little bit more detail about the how shall we say, the crimes and the killings. So Corfe Castle Murders centres around an archaeological dig. And my question to you, have you archaeological digged? Were you writing from personal experience?
I haven't, but I have friends who have. So I got not so much the technicalities of the archaeological digs, because I got a lot of that from watching Time Team, but some of the foibles of the archaeologists and the way that a community of archaeologists coexists while they're on a dig. I've got a friend who's been on residential archaeological digs and the stories she tells about the eccentric people that she's that she's spent time with. So yeah, I wanted to create this very quite intense scenario where they've all got to share a cottage, because obviously the budget is such that they've
Yeah.
all got to be shacked up together in this cottage, and the two of them are a couple, and people who don't get along, and lots of tensions and rivalries, and that gives you lots of potential motives for murder. So it, you know, works really well. And also, I liked the idea of using a piece of history around from Corfe Castle, the village,
Yeah.
which is not Corfe Castle, the castle.
Yeah.
So the rings where their archaeological dig is taking place is a site that has never been dug, that is within sight of Corfe Castle and is older than Corfe Castle. But that really interested me. I went there and did some research on it and looked around and tried to imagine where you would dig and where my pits would be and that sort of thing. So that was something that really interested me as well. I enjoyed writing that.
When you did that exploratory trip, can I ask, because it's something that is recurring for Leslie, were you wearing the proper footwear?
I was. I was. I've got a pair of walking boots that permanently live in the boot of my car,
Yeah.
so that when I go on research trips, I've got the right footwear. But Leslie, when she was in the Zoe Finch series, I originally based Leslie on Helen Mirren in Prime Suspect, and she dressed like that. But obviously, she goes down to Dorset. She can't wear a skirt suit and a pair of heels when she's
Yeah.
walking up and down
Yeah.
hills and going through mud. So that is part of her process of becoming used to being in the countryside and having to adapt and
Mhm.
be different from how she
Well,
was in Birmingham.
yeah, yeah, thank you. Now you mentioned about going down to Dorset and exploring those locations, and I wonder, I mean, given the success of this series, um, you know, do Dorset see you as a threat to their beautiful spaces because of the murder and mayhem you've wreaked there, or are they very grateful for the extra publicity to the area?
They seem to be grateful. I've had fans who have done tours of Dorset
Yeah,
based on my books, which is
wonderful.
amazing. When I
Yeah,
get an email from somebody saying, "Yeah, I went down to Dorset for a week and I went to all of the locations," and that is just amazing that
it's
people want
great.
to do that based on something I created. So I love the fact that people are going to Dorset because of the books, or if it enriches their enjoyment of
Yeah,
Dorset. People in Dorset seem quite happy that I've written the books there. I get a lot of readers in Dorset, a lot of people who live in Dorset, also a lot of people who regularly visit or have been on holiday there. And I think what I didn't anticipate when I started writing the books is that you get so much more interest in a place that people love to
yeah,
visit.
yeah, yeah,
And Birmingham, although I love it, is not that place. And so while there are a lot of Brummies who are reading crime, there aren't as many people from outside Birmingham who know Birmingham.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Of the identification with the place,
Mm,
when because I know, for example, a lot of my adult life was in the Northeast. So, so Anne Cleeve's Vera, LJ Ross's series,
mm,
you can think, oh, God, yeah, I know that. Or, or Mary Hannah's series. I know those places. I know what they're
mm,
writing about. I've been down that street. I know that coastal path.
yeah,
And I think it's so lovely as a reader, to be able to say, oh yeah, yeah, oh God, yeah, 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 I know that. And so, but as you say, that sense of a lovely place probably tends to attract more people going there inside and
yep.
out rather than, yeah. But thank you for a crime series in Birmingham, because those those typical places that people write about, it's lovely when there's other places too,
Mm, mm,
and I can't wait to get into that series as well. That's, so thank you. Anyway, back to Dorset. And so the Clifftop murders, so Leslie's become settled in the team. And again, it's a lovely team, and the dynamic that you weave between the team. You said about people being real, and that, yeah, it's one of the things that I found so appealing, is that you could imagine these detective constables knocking at your door, coming to talk to you, doing the work. And in Clifftop Murders, the sight that you have, at least for that first murder, over the cliff edge, very unpleasant. The person that, and again, it's right at the start of the book, but sadly, the person that's killed, Amina Khan, and she works in the same legal firm as Elsa. Yeah. But she's there in her capacity as that amateur photographer, capturing those shots early in the morning. And again, I always love bringing it back to the author. Are you an early morning photographer?
Not early morning, but I've stood in that exact spot waiting to get a photograph. So, about 10 years ago, I think it was, I was in Dorset for the weekend, on a photography trip. I'd taken my camera down, my SLR down, and decided to get as many good photographs as I could. And it's always a way with, I mean, I got early morning photographs around Swanage because I was staying in Swanage, so that was great, going on the pier, going along the beach when it was quiet, that kind of thing. And then there was one afternoon where I went up to Studland. I got the bus up to Studland and it started to rain. And I thought, oh, this is not ideal for photography. But as I started walking towards Old Harry Rocks, everybody was coming the other way because it started to rain and all the people were streaming off Ballard Down. I noticed that the sun was shining over Bournemouth. You could see Bournemouth in the distance. So I thought, well, if the sun is shining there and it's raining here, at some point there's going to be a rainbow. So I sat myself down on the grass near Old Harry Rocks, spread out my waterproof to try and keep as much grass dry as possible, and waited for an hour. And then eventually there was a rainbow over Old Harry Rocks, and I took a photo of it. And that eventually inspired the opening scene in that book.
Yeah. And again, thank you, because in our conversation today, the sense that readers, when we go through the pages, of your book, or we're listening, to know what of your experiences fed in to that, and thinking, oh, so that's what Rachel did. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
The tension that is there then, because of Amina being Elsa's colleague, the creation of that law firm. Do did you have any in mind? Is it purely fictional? Your own dealings with a legal firm.
Purely fictional, that law
Yeah.
firm. Yeah, I wanted Elsa to be senior but not in charge.
Yeah.
I wanted there to be people that she would rub up against, and Aurelia is that person more than anybody, and comes back in later books. And I wanted it to be small enough that we didn't have to worry about a huge office and a massive cast of characters, but big enough that there could be some internal politics, and it wasn't just three people sitting in one office above a shop in Bournemouth somewhere. And it also had to be big enough that it was worthy of Elsa moving down to London to get a job there and become a partner there. So yes, it's purely, it really started with the characters and an idea of where it would be located in Bournemouth, and then grew from there.
Like, so again, the way you describe things, so that office and how it is bigger, as you say, than just three people in one room, and Leslie walking through that office, and that description it's one of the things that stuck with me, and I think, again, coming back, your power of description, and that you transport us to these places, but detail as well. So it's not just those open spaces, because there's a lot of open spaces, but the detail as well. I'm thinking of the house that the archaeological team inhabit, and the way you describe that, and the different levels in that house, and it's and you're there moving up and down, and all the creepiness that is involved around that group of people. Just coming back to that first book, to Corfe Castle Murders, and the archaeological dig, and the team, and those the funding coming from the two institutions.
Mm.
Were you worried in case either of those institutions might be unhappy about being mentioned in the book? Did you go have a word with anyone?
I wasn't at the time, but I'm now a bit more careful because I sell more books now. So, for example, I mean, moving on to the third book, people have asked me if I've had contact from John Lewis about the
I was
way I
going to
portray
say,
them. I
yeah,
haven't. I talk a lot to people in the National Trust because the National Trust
yeah,
have got a real presence in Dorset, and
yeah,
particularly on the Isle of Purbeck. And people, everybody I've spoken to in the National Trust loves my books because I think I set them in places where they have a presence, and I make, although I put tension and murders and
yeah.
things in those places, I also, my love of those places and the beauty of them definitely comes through, and hopefully helps to encourage people to go there. But yeah, it is something I'm much more aware now. So if I'm going to be um, more derogatory towards a business or an organisation, I'll probably make it up now. I'll probably invent one based on
Yeah,
based on a real one, but not the
yeah.
same. But I mean, I think some institutions are so big that they don't really get too worried about one book having.
No,
And
and I
I've never had a real pop at any institutions.
yeah, and yeah, because it's more the individual and what they might be doing or not doing.
Yeah.
That of course is the focus. So I wasn't going to ask you about John Lewis, but I was going to ask you about the National Trust. And that being, there's building up to book three, there's mentions of the National Trust and their considerable presence in the area. But by the time we get to the island murders, then it's very much the backdrop because sadly
Mm.
one of the volunteers is comes to an unpleasant end. That working, within the context of that organization, and taking ideas that might come from it, the setup, the context. Have you had fun with that?
I did, yeah. I mean, the most fun I had with that book was writing about Brownsea Island because I love Brownsea Island, and I really liked the idea of, because I didn't know until when I was doing the research for the island murders that there is a population, a very small population on Brownsea Island, and it's predominantly National Trust staff. Very small number of John Lewis people, but that's a much less permanent population mostly. Um, and I thought, what would it be like to live in a place where you're part of a tiny, isolated community, but the only reason you're part of that community is because you work with these people. So you're living with your boss day in, day out.
Yeah,
And I thought that could be mined for all sorts of tension and secrets and things that people want to do that are about their personal lives, but they're in their workplace all the time. So yeah, that was another one that gave me plenty of opportunities to find motives for murder, and plenty of suspects.
and I was going to say, not least of all because the whole issue around car parking.
Yes. Oh, car parking in Dorset. Yes.
Yeah,
I mean, car
and again,
parking.
not saying anything untoward, but I love the way how, again, coming from Birmingham and the big city, and Leslie just cannot get her head round, about needing to join the National Trust in order to be able to deal with the car parking in a more efficient way.
Yeah, and that comes from personal experience. My parents were members of the National Trust, and in the first year we used that membership to go to Cork Castle and to go to various other places. But after that, they carried on being members so that we could park anywhere we wanted to on the Isle of Purbeck, and it's worth it. Your membership fee is more than you would spend on parking in a year if you're there all the time. So that was something that I quite liked as a little thing to get in there.
I love that. The other sort of, like, I found it humorous, and I know we shouldn't, laugh at murder, but I loved the tension in book one between the archaeologists and their digging and searching for evidence, and them not being happy about the crime scene you know, detectives and doing their forensic work, and thinking that, you know, the police forensic team would be disrespectful and not pay attention, you know, to the location. I loved that, again, that moment of tension between, you know, what are they doing in my tents? Well,
Yes. Yeah, and it's the fact that they already have tents. So we could use those as forensic tents,
yeah, yeah,
but they're being used differently.
yeah.
Um, and I think because one of the things I've done a lot of research on is forensic procedure.
Yeah.
I've done courses on it. I've read lots of books. I find it really interesting. And so, you know, I knew a bit about that and about the way that they go about doing that. And obviously there are some overlaps with archaeological digging and forensics in some cases. Um, but there are things that are different. Um, and in a case like that, the police forensics team would take precedence over the archaeologists, the archaeological team. And often it's the other way around. So I live in an area where we're having a new rail line built. One of the old railway lines is being reopened. They're clearing the cutting and they're putting in new stations. It's all had to stop because of an archaeological find. But in Corfe Castle Murders, the archaeology has to stop because of the forensics.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, and they can't carry on with their archaeology because it's been there for hundreds of years. It'll still be there, but they're worried it won't.
Another element, again, that I really appreciate in the way that you write, and it's almost, it's like, I don't know how to say this, but like, you know, the unspectacular everyday, you know, it's, I don't think nothing is far-fetched.
Mm,
And the characters are people that you could so easily meet. It's not that you're writing, you know, magnified monsters,
mm,
weird people. It's the other person who's writing, I'm reminded of, is the Norwegian author Karen Fossen,
okay.
where the crime is just that unfortunate occurrence, and it's not that somebody's set out to be malevolent in a
Mm,
way, you know,
mm.
but that it's just things have happened. That
Yeah. And I know some crime writers are interested in exploring the nature of evil, and will have quite a lot of content in their books that is about that and can be quite unpleasant to read. And it's something that I really don't like. It really is not my cup of tea as a reader, so I don't write it. So I don't write from the point of view of the killer.
yeah,
I'm not interested in understanding, apart from as one of a group of suspects and understanding what the dynamic in what's going on. I'm not really all that interested in delving into the psychology of killers and what makes them tick. I'm more interested in the situations and the relationships
yeah,
that lead to something like that happening.
yeah,
And the situations and relationships between the detectives, because that I really enjoy writing
yeah.
that, building those relationships and seeing how that impacts on their work and vice versa.
And an element of that that I think is again, it's just you and those details of how at the start the junior officers tend to look at Dennis
Mm,
and wait for Dennis's reaction whenever Leslie gives them an order. I mean, they shouldn't, you know, because they should take what Leslie's saying, and how that shifts, you know, over the timeline of the books, where
mm,
they, you know, they actually start looking at Leslie first and then to Dennis. And I love the way you do that, you know, that change in the dynamic in the setting of the team.
mm, yeah. And particularly Tina, that happens first with her because she sees Leslie as a bit of a mentor and a role model.
Yeah,
But I wanted to have this idea that they were a pre-existing team. I mean, Tina's not part of the team at the beginning. She's in uniform, but she's worked closely with the others. She knows them well. So they all know each other. They're used to each other. They've been working in the same force for years. And this is how we do things around here. And then Leslie comes
yeah,
in and starts shaking things up. And they're all just looking to Dennis to tell them what to do. and how to react, and they don't want to annoy Dennis by reacting
Yeah.
wrongly.
Yeah.
But then over time they realise, I think they realise A, that they can trust Leslie, and B, that Dennis is starting to trust Leslie.
Yeah.
And so they don't have to worry too much about what he's thinking. They
Yeah.
don't have to second guess him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the way you write the aftermath of the crime and those people that are affected, so the victims, emotional partners, work
Mm.
partners, and those family liaison officers, that you bring in, and how they function. Because I think, again, for many of us who thankfully, crime hasn't visited in that way, to understand how those things work. So I think you give lovely insight as well into the procedure,
Mm.
and like I say, with those family liaison officers, and how they function and how people react to.
Yeah, I think the family liaison officer's role is a really interesting one, because I work with a police advisor, Graham Bartlett, and
Great,
he,
Graham. Yeah.
yeah, and he feeds back on my manuscripts, and I ask him questions while I'm writing. And one of the things that we talked about quite a lot is the family liaison officer, what their real role is, to what extent families can say they don't want a family liaison officer, because in reality, as far as the police are concerned, they're part of the investigating team. Their real role is to be the eyes and ears in the house and find out what's really going on and get a sense of the family dynamic. But obviously the role that they present is a support for the family, and they do a lot of that as well. And that makes it quite interesting when you're identifying who you're going to have as your family liaison officer, because they need to be able to balance those two things. And then in some of my books, the family completely reject the idea of having a family liaison officer. They refuse to have somebody in their house. They've worked out that it's somebody spying on them. But then in others they don't, and the FLO is a useful source of information to the detective team, but also can be a useful source of support to the victims' families.
Yeah, and those families as well, within these three books anyway, that parents with small children, and how you handle, that loss as a parent with little ones. How do you help them process loss? Like I say, I think, you could think police procedural. Well, it's going to be the nuts and bolts of a thing, but I think there's an awful lot of emotion brought in by other aspects. So it's not just a set of people getting on with solving a crime.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's a beauty. Like I say, I just think they could be people next door, that have gone through things, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Now, Rachel, I am aware of time, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. And I'm thinking about wishing you all the best with these books, but these books are already really successful. So maybe wishing you all the best with these books in a different form than now.
Yes.
And maybe if we think of it like that. And so I think my last question for you is going to be this. And you've already spoken about it a little bit, but I wonder, like, when do you feel that you're done with a character? And you said that you wanted to shift because of the shift in your skill and capability. But then, so it makes me want to ask you, are you ever really done with any of your characters?
I don't think I am, because I write in a universe where characters
Mm.
will pop up in other people's books. So, for example, Mo has moved up to Scotland and he's in the McBride and Tanner books. Originally, I planned those because I enjoyed writing Petra and I wanted to give her something. And then one of my readers, I told him that I was moving a character up to Scotland, and he said, "Oh, please let it be Mo." And then I thought, "Oh, Mo's wife's Scottish. Yep, I'll move Mo to Scotland as well, and we'll have him." And that again gives me the opportunity to see somebody moving to a very different environment, and having quite a different experience of it from what Leslie does. Zoe Zoe is constantly, when she's up in Cumbria, she's feeling a bit of a fish out of water. She's ringing Leslie up, she's ringing Mo up, she's getting a bit of sanity from them and people to talk to, because she can't always talk to her partner Carl because he's PSD, so he's investigating bent coppers, and she's always worried about treading over
Yeah,
things, that
that
talking about
crossover.
things she
Yeah,
shouldn't be.
yeah,
Yeah. Zoe also physically comes down to Dorset to help Leslie
yeah.
look into the death of DCI Mackey. And so I don't think characters are ever really done for me. I think even if they're not appearing in books, they will be
Mm-hmm.
referred to.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, Johnny's going to be coming back. So Johnny leaves Dorset under a cloud, but he will come back. The cloud will still be there,
Mm-hmm.
which will be part of the story, but he
Yeah,
will come back in a future Dorset crime book.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rachel, thank you so much for our time together and all that you've, spoken to us about the books, your experience, whole process of writing. And more than anything, thank you for your writing and the joy that you've brought to so many. I only hope with this interview that others might, become aware of your writing who aren't yet, and just that, the number of people that they grow. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. It's so lovely to hear that you enjoy them so much.
Without a doubt, and I shall be on to some more because my trip to Wales will be continuing.
Mm.
So yeah, so definitely, and the discovery of Dorset. I've never been, and it just makes me think, whoa,
I
a
recommend it.
place to explore. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
Okay, thank you, and I do, as I say, I do hope we get a chance to speak further
That
about
would
your
be lovely.
writing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Bye for now.